So by the time that slides come up, how I have structured today's presentation is basically three parts. First, I will try to speak about what kind of vision we have set for ourselves and how we are trying to enable that across various pillars of planet resilience, and followed by a one slide approach on what the team can, or let's say the audience today can follow to in fact start on this journey. And in fact, my suggestion would not be much different from what Mr. Dinesh spoke about. And lastly, I would speak about a successful use case and a very low hanging fruit that probably most of you would already have either capitalized, and if not, we would request you to immediately work on that or immediately start with that journey. It will definitely, it's one way to prove that sustainability does not come at a cost. It is definitely a business positive situation, and that's how we have to actually think about every problem in the domain of sustainability. So next slide, please. Right. So at Tata Motors, we have made some very bold commitments, and these commitments are out public now. First commitment or the first pillar is on net zero, where we have committed that by 2040, our passenger vehicle segments, the cars that we manufacture, will be net zero by 2040. And for our commercial vehicle segment, will be net zero by 2045. Now, I take special pride in mentioning this because if you look globally, not only India, if you look globally, none of the commercial vehicle manufacturers for its entire fleet of such heavy and medium applications have actually committed to such bold targets. And given that the context of India, where we are in terms of infrastructure readiness, in terms of technology readiness, or let's say in terms of readiness of the fuels that will be used to enable that, a lot of ground is yet to be covered, both from technology side, infrastructure side, policy side, and all these elements are actually being worked upon, being pioneered by the company to enable this 2045 vision. So these are not just statements, but actually very solid work on the ground going to enable these elements that we're speaking about. The next pillar is on circular economy. The idea is that, so definitely we cannot have infinite growth from a finite set of resources. So we have to leverage how do we utilize our resources maximum, how do we reduce the resource pressure on earth and still continue to grow. And that's where circular economy comes into play. And there are certain matrices and targets that we have taken to ensure that we have business models aligned to this particular pillar, ensure that we have designs, processes, and functions aligned to this particular pillar of delivering circular economy. The last pillar is on nature and biodiversity. Now, if you look at the concept of nature and biodiversity, is probably one of the most ignored topics in sustainability talks, especially in terms of corporates. But at Tata Motors, or in fact, not only Tata Motors, the entire Tata Group, the task that we have taken at hand is first of all to understand what kind of impact we have caused on this because of biodiversity. Because of our operations. And once we assess those impact, and these are pure play science data-based calculation as to what was the extent of our impact. Once we assess our impact, the next step is actually to take remedial actions to counter those impacts, and not only counter those impacts, but actually create a net positive impact. And that's what the third pillar talks about. So these are some pretty bold commitments that we have done. And next slide, please. And these commitments are not just commitments, there are actually actions. I was mentioning is actually happening today as we speak. So if we speak about net zero, our product strategy for next 14-15 years is completely on roadmap. Right, R&D activities have kicked off. We know that what product is to be sold at what percentage in what year. So that kind of detailing has been done at a strategy level. Our RE100 roadmap is in place. Now, RE100 is an initiative that Tata Motors is signatory to. The commitment here is that by 2030, all the electricity that we use in our operations will be fueled by renewable energy only. Now, the grid in India, actually, they are also on a journey of greening the grid, but it will happen in due course of its time. So Government of India, it has taken a target of 2070, and we hope that by 2070, the entire grid will be green. But we have taken this target of actually going to 100% renewables by 2030. And in fact, that's a public commitment that we have made, but internally we want to do it much earlier. And that's how the roadmap we have laid down for. And we'll speak about in detail in the successful case studies that I'll be speaking about in the later part of the slide. We are committed to something called science-based target. A quick summary of science-based target is that Sustainability just cannot be anecdotal events where we plant, let's say, 10,000 trees or 1,000 trees and say that, okay, yes, we can do. It has to go beyond a certain level of just, glossy pictures and cuddly animals. So the idea here is not that science-based target initiative, that organization actually validates that whatever we are planning to do or whatever decarbonization roadmap that we have put ourselves on, whether or not it aligns with the science of climate. So that's what science-based target does. So we have committed to science-based targets. Our targets are under validation. The validation will begin soon, but that's where we are. That explains how, let's say, committed we are to the cause of this net zero. On the pillar of circular economy, while resources definitely a huge focus, there are targets of being water positive and being zero waste to landfill by 2030. That's again a huge target, being water neutral or water positive for all your operational sites, having zero waste to landfill for all operational sites. And mind you, we have foundry operations also. Foundry sand is a big element, and we are trying to find out very innovative ways to actually deal with that kind of waste. And with that kind of a stretch, such targets have been taken. Also, when we speak about circular economy, so this topic is actually very noble. When I say noble, it is, while in practice to some amount of recyclability, or let's say reuse has always been part of our culture, or let's say in across globally also, people have been trying to use at max what is possible usage of a particular item. But when it comes to implementing it at an organizational level, what we need is actually a framework to measure it, because unless and until you measure it, you cannot improve it. So what we are trying to decipher is that what should be the right framework that we should be using across our departments, across our functions, which would help us to enable to understand where we are in terms of circularity, set up some bold targets, and then chase those targets to deliver this in true sense. So that's where the second pillar comes in. Biodiversity, I briefly spoke about. So we are doing the baselining activities actually undergoing as we speak today. So experts are there on our sites trying to assess how much of damage we would have done. And then later on, the plan is that we invest into nature-based solutions to actually counteract whatever impact we would have created. And not just counteract, we actually do much more than what damage we have done. We also recently held something called a biodiversity conference for our senior leadership, where we had invited about eight very experts of this biodiversity domain. So, for example, we had speakers speaking on wetland conservation or grassland conservation, trying to educate us, actually, us and our leadership, as to what are the potential, how business and biodiversity can merge, what areas can we actually look at where we can create or pioneer the area of nature-based solution projects. Yeah, next slide, please, Norishwari. Yes, and on this journey, we have also invited our supply chain members, all our supply chain vendor partners, to actually look at this entire approach of being sustainable, not as a top-down initiative or something, let's say, a client or a vendor relationship, but together be in this journey as a partner. And that's what we are. And the next slide, you'll see what initiative we have kicked off to enable this. But the idea here is that let us define our vision together. So while Tata Motors may have taken a target of net zero, let's say in 2045, what should be the net zero target, right? Or just targets for our supply chain partners. So let's define those. So let's evolve from being in a typical relationship to actually being partners together into towards the sustainable goal. The next step is, once we define our vision, let's develop our roadmap also. In what year, how much we will do, how will we be measured, what metrics would best suit to a supply chain partner to actually measure and report against. So let's build a resilient and a strong ecosystem. So that's what the core principle is. And eventually, yes, deploy these actions to actually make the changes, or let's say see these changes in action, and eventually handhold each other. When we say handhold each other, if there are cost learnings to be shared, if let's say one of the casting suppliers has come out with some innovative ways to reduce, let's say, embodied emissions of casting item, then maybe it can be shared with other manufacturer also. And if it is a good idea, why not be cross shared, do learn them. So that's what we are asking our supply chain partners also to come along this journey, rather than it being a one-way download of this is what I want and you give me that. So that's no way the time. We are way beyond that kind of a time, and that's what we are evolving to. Next slide, please. And in this regard, what we have launched, and we made this announcement last, I think, September, yes, last September, where we have kicked off a forum called AKM. So AKM is a Sanskrit word, stands for unity. And the idea here is that we have a think tank, or let's say a forum of CEO and CSOs of all the some of the select vendor partners of our company, I mean, out of Tata Motors, along with employees of TML, where we get together to understand and collaborate, do some kind of innovation, do resource sharing, do cross learning to understand if the challenge, because similar sector will have similar problem. If a sector has solved, or let's say a player of that sector has solved that problem, why cannot that same solution be percolated to other members of that sector also? So the idea here is that we create a collaborative platform which meets every quarter, and we discuss, we brainstorm the typical challenge, we discuss the progress, we discuss how to overcome if there is specific set of challenge. If there are success stories or winning stories, we share them within the ecosystem, so that it becomes a lighthouse project to actually guide people into this journey. So it actually fits very well into the agenda of not asking them to do, but actually working along with them to deliver what our vision is also. So it is not TML's vision, it does not remain TML's vision of net zero, it becomes our cumulative vision of net zero, and that's how we want to progress. So this is what we have launched in September, and we are about to operationalize it very soon. Final member selections are almost done, and this is also where we will associate with different industry bodies to seek in their expertise also, because since this is a collaborative forum, we need all hands on the deck to actually deliver this, and that's what the plan is. Next slide, please. Right. This brings me to the second portion of my presentation, where I was asked to actually how should people who are yet to start on this journey should do. I have laid down some very simple 5 steps. May not seem very jazzy, but they are very powerful. The first suggestion that I would have for all the listeners who are yet to start, many would already be there or maybe much matured than what we are, but people who are yet to start, the idea is you start measuring your basic matrices. You can start with your greenhouse gas, water emission, I mean water consumption, your waste, what types of waste you are doing. You may not I mean, you may not require an expert to actually look into this, understand this. All the study materials, or let's say academic knowledge that you need to do this, is available online. You can dedicate some man hours of an existing source and actually ask him to go through what is required. Start measuring these, and start once you start measuring this, then only you will understand what is your footprint, what are the complication. You may realize that you will have to put certain processes in place by which you are able to measure also. So one of the biggest challenge for an OEM, or let's say any company, is that what kind of visibility it has on its footprint. So the first step is to tackle that. Start measuring, start with very basic elements of GHG, water and mix, and then keep expanding it to, let's say, 100 more matrices of ESG. So ESG is environment, social and governance. So start with these basic elements, but continue to expand to more and more metrics. When you start measuring it, you would understand what your footprint are. The next step is to reduce these footprints or improve on these metrics. So set some targets, set some long-term targets, percolate that long-term targets into your yearly targets as well. What should be my target for this year? What should be my target for next year? When you set some targets, you would probably need to require to do some benchmarking as to how the world is moving, or consult some experts like ACMA and all, or even reach out to the relevant parties to understand what is their vision. What type of target would they be expecting from you to actually deliver upon? And that's what the step 2 is about. Set long-term targets, set short-term targets. Then third aspect is to translate this target function wise. So let's say if I speak about net zero target, so let's say, let me take an example of Tata Motors. So when I say net zero, so net zero for my R&D function would mean that they have to deliver products which are tailpipe zero emissions. Net zero, the same metric of net zero for my operational, let's say, plant people would mean that they have to increase their RE percentage, renewable energy percentage. Net zero target for my sales team would mean that they have to sell a certain portion of zero emission vehicles in their sales model, in their sales. So the same target has to be percolated in different functions in actionable form, so that they can actually work towards it. That's step 3. The fourth item is evaluate the levers. So once a function understands that what are the targets that I have to work upon, the team will then have to evaluate what are the levers available to them to actually deliver on those targets. And whatever cost is implied, how much of benefit, how much of cost, all this has to be brought into the table, discussed with management. What are low hanging fruits, what are short term action plans, what are long term action plans, and then once you freeze on them, you go to step 5 and do what is called act. So start acting on those identified levers, start acting on those let's say those levers which you have, let's say low hanging fruits that is there. And once you act, you will automatically see that in your repetitive cycle of measurement, some improvement has started coming in. And that's how you continue to keep this cycle on. So that's a simple 5-step process that I would like to suggest for team members who are yet to start on this journey. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about switching to renewable energy, because this is something that we are going ahead with full blown speed right now for all our operational sites. Next slide, please. So Tata Motors is actually committed to something called RE100 that I spoke about. We have also committed to science-based targets, which where we have to decarbonize at a rate that is in line with climate science. And as I spoke about, we're also committed to being net zero by 2040 and 2045 for our CV vehicle, 2040 for our passenger vehicles. Now, while we have done this exercise and we are on the path of progressing towards it, and many times you would also be finding news articles of 7 megawatt let's say solar project, or let's say some 14 megawatt rooftop project. These projects keeps coming in the newspapers, but I want to say that going to renewables was actually a no brainer for us. So when we did the entire evaluation, we are actually making good amount of money when we switch to renewables, when we move away from the grid. When I say away from the grid, move away from black power to renewable power, because renewables is actually cheaper than black power. Generation of electricity using solar panel or windmills is per unit is actually cheaper than generating it through coal. So that's a hard reality. So what I would request, let's say if the team members had to follow suit and say that they have to take something, a low hanging fruit immediately for action, shoot for RE, shoot for renewable energy. I mean, increasing the renewable energy content within your compound, within your operation. Start with baselining, understanding what are your power consumption. Do you have some setup already there? Then assess different options that are there. What would are the different procurement levers available to you at your site? Because power is a concurrent subject. There is a lot of complications involved in terms of policy at state level and at center level. So figure out what is applicable to you, what is not applicable. All the policy documents are available freely online. You can find them, do some amount of research, and you'll come to a conclusion. Then assess your options, what options are there. Then strategize as to what levers you would want to exercise. Once you have access strategize. So let's say if you suggest, say, I mean, you come up with a roadmap that, okay, I will maximize my on-site solar to first land, then I will go to off-site, then off-site wind or hybrid. So strategize based on what your appetite is, what the regulation is allowing you to do, and then implement those actions and keep monitoring whether or not you are making progress, because every step that you take should give you some calculated returns, whether or not you are actually meeting. Do some corrective actions if required. So with this, I would like to end. Next slide, please. So that's all that I had to share in the quick 15 minutes that I had. Hopefully it was helpful to the team. Happy to have any questions, if any.
Thank you, Mr. Samdarshi, for sharing the existing and inspiring work Tata Motors is doing to achieve carbon neutral automotive industries. Tata Motors has never failed to amaze their stakeholders with their approach and practices.